So given f and g, find f of 2x and 3 times g of x. F of 2x means that wherever there's an x, you're plugging in 2x. Wherever there's an x, you plug in 2x. So we do 2, and then instead of this x, we put a 2x squared. Minus 3, instead of that x, you put 2x. And that's for f of 2x. We can simplify this out. So exponents before you multiply. 2x squared is 4x squared. Times the 2 makes 8x squared. And then multiply 3 times 2, you get negative 6x. That's all for our f of 2x part. 3 times g of x means you're going to take g and multiply the whole thing by 3. The whole thing, 3x minus 4, the whole thing times 3. Distribute that, you get 9x minus 12. And combine like terms with the rest of it. 8x squared stays by itself. Negative 6 plus 9 is 3x minus 12. C. Factor. So we've got 4 terms. We're going to split it and do factor by grouping, because that's what you do when you've got 4 terms. Grouping, you have to take out whatever's in common in the first 2 terms. So we've got x squared that we can take out. You take out an x squared, you're left with 2x plus 3. From negative 32x minus 48, we can take out a negative 16. And you'd be left with 2x plus 3. When you do grouping, those 2 parentheses have to be the same. That's the trick for grouping. They have to be the same, and that's one of your factors. Your other factor is the front stuff, so the x squared minus 16. And it says factor completely, which means if there's anything that you can factor any further, you have to do it. X squared minus 16 factors more. That's x plus 4x minus 4. So it's 2x plus 3, x plus 4, x minus 4, a. So to simplify, I to the 13th and I to the 14th, you have to know the pattern. Pattern always starts with I. And then it goes negative 1, negative I, positive 1. It's I1, and the negatives go in the middle. So I to the 13th, there's a couple ways you could do it. One way is just count through, starting here with a 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's just a regular I. You could just count through it, which means 14 would be a negative 1. The other way is kind of the same, but there's a little bit of a shortcut. You just do division. I minus 1, that would be, let's see, minus 1 plus I, same thing. The other way is that you do division. So we divide by 4. You take 13 and you divide it by 4. You get 3, which would be 12, which means you have a remainder 1. That remainder 1 tells you I. Then you do 14, and you divide by 4. That would be 3, which is 12. Subtract, you get a remainder 2. That remainder tells you it's the minus 1. It's the same thing. You can either count all the way through, or you can do division, and the remainder tells you what it's going to be. But either way, you have to know I1. Two negatives in the middle. So let's see. So to solve the system, the easiest way to solve a system is to use your calculator. You type this in for y1, and you solve this. You get y equals, add the 8 over, or add the x over. You get x plus 8. And you type that in for y2. So y1 is x squared plus 6. And y2 is x plus 8. So you type them in for y1, y2. Then you draw. You can see you've got a parabola and a line. You can scroll up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better, because we're looking for where they intersect. Your calculator can do the intersections really, really easy. For Casios, you just push G-solve. For TIs, you push second calc. It's called intersection, intersect. You get -1, 7, and then the other point is 210. -1, 7, and 210. 210, -1, 7. So that's D. Here's a work problem. Takes Holly 10 hours, and Mark, if he helps, it takes 6 hours. How long would it take Mark by himself? So we've got Holly, we've got Mark, and we have together. The setup for these, you got to remember, is 1 over however long it takes. So Holly by herself, it says, was 10 hours. If Mark helps, that means together it would take 6 hours. And then it asks how long if Mark did it by himself. So that's where you put X. So to solve this, since we've got a bunch of fractions, you want to multiply by the common denominator. Between 10x and 6, that would be 60x. So you multiply all of these by 60x. And then reduce it. So 60 divided by 10 is 6x. 60x divided by x is just 60. And then 60x divided by 6 is 10x. And then subtract your 6x over. So you get 4x equals 60. Divide, you get 15. 15 hours. So for this, we've got the boat problem, which is a distance, rate, and time. The stream flows at 6 miles per hour. The boat goes 4 miles upstream and then returns. So it's going upstream and downstream. And there's the total trip. What is the approximate speed of the boat in still water? So we got to fill in everything we know. we know the total distance. It went 4 miles upstream and then came back. So it went 4 miles upstream and 4 miles downstream. The stream is flowing at 6 miles per hour. When you're going upstream, that's because the stream's coming against you, which means the speed of the water is going to slow you down. You would subtract it. When you go downstream, the speed of the water is going with you. It's going to make you go faster. So when it makes you go slower upstream and faster downstream, you either subtract the speed of the water or add the speed of the water. And then we're told the total time was 2 hours. So this setup, when you do the little table, it gives you the entire equation. We can see 4 over x minus 6, fill that in here, plus 4 over x plus 6 equals the total time of 2. If you want, you could say 2 over 1 if you want to see everything as a fraction. So when you go to solve it, we're going to multiply everything by the common denominator, which is going to be both x minus 6 and x plus 6. So you multiply every piece, every term by x minus 6, x plus 6. Every term gets multiplied by it. What that's going to do is clear out all of our fractions. We can cancel out the x minus 6. You can cancel out the x plus 6. Nothing here cancels, so you just have to multiply it all. So that's 4 times x plus 6. That's 4x. 4 times 6 is 24. Plus, distribute again, that's 4x minus 24 equals, we have to multiply these two together, x minus 6 times x plus 6. It's going to multiply the x squared minus 36. And then multiply that by the 2. So that's 2x squared minus 72. To solve this, since we have x squareds, x's, numbers, we have everything, we need it all on one side so we can factor. So let's combine our 4x plus 4x, our negative 24 and positive 24 cancel out. And then move that 8x over. So we can solve this. It is factorable. Everything can be divided by 2. And then you're looking for two numbers that multiply to be 36 and add to be 4. 36 is 9 times 4. That doesn't add to be 4. 12 and 3. That doesn't add to be 4. If you can't come up with it, here's a good trick. Take the equation. Let your calculator solve it. 2x squared minus 8x minus 72. Come back to your graph. Two x squared minus 8x minus 72. So it shows you a parabola. You could change your window if you wanted to. All we're looking for from the calculator is where it crosses the x-axis. Where it crosses the x-axis. That's called the root. So on Casio's, you push G-solve. On TI's, you push calc, second calc. And you want the root. We don't want the negative one because these are times. We don't care about, or no, this is a speed. We don't care about a negative speed. We care about the positive speed. 8.32. And that's our speed of the boat. That was our rate right here. 8.3. You can't have a negative rate. We're not going to be going negative miles per hour. So simplifying a fraction, that's just factoring and canceling. So factor the top, you get, multiply the 18, add to be 3, that's 6 and 3. It's going to be a negative 6 and a positive 3. Multiply to be negative 6, add to be 1, that's going to be 3 and 2. And it has to be a positive 1 when you add, so a positive 3 and a negative 2. Cancel out whatever you can, so the x plus 3's cancel. You're left with x minus 6, x minus 2, right there for D. Simplifying a cube root. 250 is not a perfect cube, but 125 is. 125 times 2. We know the cube root of 125 is 5, and since it's negative, you'll be a negative 5. And then that 2 would stay inside our cube root. Looking at our x to the 6, that's 2 pairs. We have 2 sets of 3. So x squared gets to come out. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 10, if there's 10 y's, that means there's 3 sets with 1 left over. You could write them all out if you wanted to. Write out 10 of them. You want to see how many sets of 3. So there's a set of 3. There's a set of 3. There's a set of 3 with 1 left over. 3 sets, 1 left over. And then z to the 5th, that would be 1 set. That would be 2 z's left over. Two left over. So there it is. So first thing with this, you have to remember that the 1/4 means it's like a 4th root. Since that's a 4th root, you would get rid of that by doing the 4th power. So you get x squared minus 6x. 2 to the 4th. Two times 2 is 4. 8, and then 16. 2 to the 4th is 16. And then we're going to factor this. So get everything on one side, set it equal to 0, get your 2 parentheses. So that's 8 times 2 is 16. And a negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. And when you solve it, get x equals 8. And x equals negative 2. And it did say circle all that applies, so there they are. You can plug these back in just to make sure that they work. I guess we should do that to make sure they're not extraneous. Negative 2 squared would be 4. Negative 6 times negative 2 would be plus 12. 16 to the Fourth root of 16 is 2. That's true. 8, plug that in also, you get 64. Minus 48. That's also 16, and the fourth root of 16 is 2. So they both work. Keep them both circled. So another thing about I, we mentioned it earlier. I is just the square root of -1. So this is like 5 plus 8 square root -1. It's kind of a weird way to think about this, but if you're trying to get the 8 back inside the square root, you would square it. It would become a 64 inside the square root, because the square root of 64 is 8. And then if you combine our two square roots here, since it's multiplying, you multiply them, you just get -64. Which is B. The other way you could have done it is just looked at all these multiple choice options and see which one, if you simplified it, would get you the original 5 plus 8, 9. A little bit longer that way, but you see the square root of 64 is 8. That's where it came from. So this problem is talking about end behavior. As x goes to infinity, that means as we go to the right, f of x goes to positive infinity, so that's up. As x goes to negative infinity, so that's to the left, f of x goes to positive infinity, that's up. So that means the right side's going up and the left side's going up. Right side's going up, left side's going up. Right up, left up. Right's up, left is going down. That's not it. Here the right's going down, so that's not it. And the function has an absolute minimum. That means the lowest point of the entire graph happens at x equals 3. Here's x equals 3. That's not where the lowest point of the graph happens. Here's x equals 3. That's the lowest point of the entire graph. So it's B. To find all the zeros, you can do that by factoring. Start by taking out an x squared. And then you can factor the x squared minus 6x plus 8 a little bit further. Multiply to be 8, that's 4 and 2. Add to be -6, they both need to be negative. Now we need to solve that. So we get x squared equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. And x minus 2 equals 0. So you get x equals 0. Since it was squared, that's what multiplicity means. X equals 4 and x equals 2. Four and 2 and 0 with a multiplicity of 2. You could have done that without actually doing any work by hand, though. You could have graphed it. So when you graph it, it's x to the 4th minus 6x cubed. Plus 8x squared. And you're looking for zeros, which means you're looking for the roots. It crosses the x-axis at 3 points. You can see them pretty clearly. 0. That looks like 2, and that looks like 4. 0, 2, and 4. If they weren't exact, you would just do gsolve root, and it tells you 0. Since it bounces there, that's what multiplicity looks like on a graph, is because it bounces off. Also crosses at 2. And then 4 for the last point, just like we said. 0, it bounced, so I had a multiplicity of 2. So this is kind of a reverse of what we just talked about with the graphing it to see what the zeros are. Since we have an x squared, that means x equals 0 with a multiplicity of 2. So that means we're going to be touching x equals 0, and it's going to bounce at 0. This one does not bounce at 0, so it's not B. It bounces because I had a multiplicity of 2. X plus 3 means it's going to pass at x equals -3 and x equals -4. Those are the x-intercepts, the roots. -3, not this one. -3, -4, could be those. This one's +3, +4. So C is the right answer. The other thing that's got going for it is it's a negative, which means both the left and the right side are going down. From the parent function, you just got to pick out the shifts. So a +4 inside parentheses grouped with the x, that's going to affect left, right. X affects left, right. Since it's plus, that means left. 4 units to the left. The negative tells you it's reflected over the x-axis. And then a 2 is a vertical stretch. A vertical shrink would look like it would have a fraction out in front, like 1/2, 1/3, 2/3. Fraction less than 1 would make it be a shrink. That's 2, 3, and 6, C. This is another problem that you can do entirely on the calculator. You need to go to equation. And it's a simultaneous, so F1. The number of unknowns is number of variables, x, y, z, that's 3. We type in all the coefficients, so 1, 1, -5. -5, -21. Then -5, 3, -1, 13. And then 6, -5, -3, -17. And you get -6, -5, +2. -6, -5, +2. 2, 4, and 5. Which isn't one of these. Let's change A to be it. 2, 4, and 5. Those are the right answers. So determining the end behavior, that means you're basically just looking at the sketch of the graph. If you're using your calculator, you can look at the actual graph. You can type in the whole thing. So you just type it in as y1. So the easiest way to do it is just by knowing. It's an x cubed, which means you're going to have one side going up, one side going down. Anytime it's an odd exponent, you got one going up, one going down. and it's positive, so it's going to look like that. The right side's going up, the left side's going down. Right means x goes to positive infinity. This is right. This is left. This side's right. This is left. Negative infinity is left, positive infinity is the right. So what this is telling you is that the right side is going up, and the left side, this one says left is going up also. Positive infinity is up, negative infinity is down. Negative infinity is down, positive infinity is up, or down, down. So you're just looking to see which one of these matches what the graph's going to look like. The graph is going to look like this. If you didn't know that, you can type it in on your calculator and graph it and know what it's going to look like. So the right side should be going up, and the left side should be going down. Right, up, left, down, that's B. You just have to know that x goes to infinity is right, x goes to negative infinity is left. Positive infinity is right, negative infinity is left. Determine the restricted values. It's not asking you to solve it. It's just asking for the restricted values. You cannot divide by 0. So anything that would make the denominator equal 0, that's a restricted value. So factor all the denominators. X squared plus x minus 12. So multiply be 12. That's 4 and 3. It's going to be a positive 4 and negative 3. When you factor this one, you take out an x, you get x minus 3. And then x minus 3 is already there. It's by itself. So you get x minus 3, which is in all of them, tells you x cannot equal 3. That's a restricted value. X cannot equal 0. Right here, x equals 0. Not allowed to have a 0 down there. And then the other one is from the x plus 4. Can't have a negative 4. Anything that makes the denominator equal 0. So that's negative 4, 0, and 3. (81) to the negative 3 over 4. The denominator tells you the index of the radical. 81's in there, and then you got a negative 3 as your exponent. So you can do the fourth root of 81. 81 is 3 to the fourth. The negative tells you it goes to the bottom, so that's 1 over 3 cubed. And then 3 cubed is 27. Now, with the calculator, this is also really, really easy because your calculator has an exponent button. 81 to the exponent. Negative 3 over 4. Negative 3 over 4. Type your exponent in. Just make sure you put parentheses around it. It gives you the decimal, but if you have the fraction of decimal button right here, it'll change it, 1 over 27. So whenever you have parentheses to an exponent, especially squared, you write it out both times and then multiply by FOILing. So 4 times 4. Then 4 times negative 7i. And then the negative 7 times 4. It's the same thing. And then the negative 7i times negative 7i is positive 49i squared. I squared is negative 1. So you can get rid of the I squared, multiply by negative 1, makes this negative. So cross it out, change the sign. Combine your like terms. 16 minus 49 is negative 33. So obviously the answer is A. And then negative 28 is negative 56. Combine your like terms. Finding the zeros, you can graph it and get your x-intercepts using your calculator, or you could factor it and solve it by hand. So they have an x in common, you could factor out, and then you'd be left with x squared minus 4. You can factor x squared minus 4 to be x plus 2, x minus 2. Solve each one of those, you get x equals 0, x equals negative 2, and x equals positive 2. Or if you weren't able to or couldn't factor it, you can graph it. X cubed minus 4x. X to the third minus 4x. And you're just looking for the x-intercepts. So G solve root, you get negative 2, you get 0, and 2.